The first thing to do always is to try to understand the roots and the causes of the attack. If you don't do that, you can't have a sensible response. And there's a good bit of information about it. There has been extensive study of what makes young people from the almost always Muslim communities, some others in the West, become part of this monstrosity. Scott Atran, others have investigated it in some detail, and it turns out that it traces back it doesn't have strong Islamic roots. In fact, many of these people are second generation Muslims who have very little tie to the Muslim community. They pick up the radical Islamic ideology, which incidentally traces back to our ally Saudi Arabia in the course of the association, but they join for other reasons. Mainly, it seems, to find some kind of meaning and dignity and hope in their existence as marginalized people with no opportunities and humiliated, degraded. They're not necessarily from the very poorest sector, but there's just these are young men, nothing in their lives. This gives them a cause. Well, if that's the driving force, you have to deal with that. And the way to deal with that has been discussed by, for example, William Polk, one of the leading Middle East scholars, a long record in high-level U.S. National Security Council planning, Middle East, and so on. What he's pointed out is, look, the main thing, it doesn't sound dramatic, but the main thing you have to do is improve their lives, give them some alternative to the search for dignity, meaning, honor in becoming violent murderers with the utopian goal of establishing an Islamic utopia. You just have to create that alternative. Now, as for the particular act, the worst response would be military. That's what we've been doing all along. It's playing the game that ISIS is asking us to play and that Al-Qaeda asked us to play, which is attack Muslim communities, and they can use it as a recruitment tool. Virtually every serious analyst points that out. So it may feel good to say, oh, let's bomb them, but that's doing exactly what they want.
That absolutely includes making a dartboard of the Syrian city of Raqqa, then, where ISIS have their base.
When you attack Raqqa, you're attacking civilians. ISIS are not idiots. In fact, they're doing pretty sophisticated planning. So their fighters and bases will be scattered around the city. You're unlikely to hit much. What you can do is destroy the city and the people who live there, and stir up calls for revenge elsewhere and throughout a good part of the world, in fact. Many of the people coming in are the Saudis, Russians, French, coming from all over for their own reasons, and an attack on what they will perceive as an attack on civilians, Muslims, is just feeding ISIS propaganda that the Crusaders are trying to destroy the Muslim populations. We can say, look, that's crazy, but that's exactly the way it'll be perceived. And that's been going on for 15 years now. When the so-called war on terror was declared, actually redeclared, Reagan had declared one, but by Bush in 2001, Al-Qaeda, the center of Islamic terrorism, was confined to a small corner in a tribal area in northwest Afghanistan. Where is it now? All over the world. All over the world. The most terrorist killings last year, according to a UN study that just came out, were by Boko Haram. Where do they come from? They're to a large extent an offshoot of the NATO bombing of Libya, which destroyed the country, turned it back into warring tribes, sent a flood of jihadis into Africa, weapons all over the place, Africa as far as the Levant, opened a corridor which hadn't existed before for African refugees to flow to Europe. That was the effect of the NATO decision to violate their own Security Council resolution, which is what they did, and to become immediately the Air Force of the rebels instead of pursuing the terms of the resolution. So if you have, it's kind of the old cliche about if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But yeah, we have a hammer. Our comparative advantage is violence. And if you use that comparative advantage, you're going to have the effects that we've seen for 15 years. It's the same with the drone attacks, the global assassination campaign. They probably generate what we call terrorists faster than they kill suspects. And it's been happening all over. And if we decide to fall into the ISIS trap and respond to these atrocities by bombing them, that's giving them a gift. Same if the Russians decide to attack the ISIS for bombing the Russian plane. It's probably what they want. It'll mean more Russians people from the Caucasus will flood down to join the terrorist groups.